Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock practicing necromancer. And I hope everybody's having a good day today because this is going to be a little bit different video for you guys. Now, I've had a lot of questions coming to me, and most of them revolve around how do you break free of the chains of limitations? And to be able to better yourself within whatever structure that you're doing, be it work, be it spiritualism, be it mental, be it emotional. And in a day, in a day that we are constantly bombarded by propaganda, by distractions, if you will. I thought it would be a great time to put forth some stuff that would benefit you as the individual. And this is going to take a lot of money from you guys to be able to do because you're looking at things roughly about anywhere from, say, $6 to $20 to 30 some odd dollars, just to purchase just one of these books, depending on the type of book. And if you're able to get them, either new or old, used is what they refer to it as, especially off Amazon or, perhaps a thrift store or whatever. But these books will benefit you in the long run. And I've got them laid out in the floor, literally in front of me here, in the order that I recommend people to read them. Now, most of you know that I'm not just a necromancer and I'm not just a student of history, mythology, and all that stuff, that I am indeed a spiritualist, but I am also a realist as well. So, those of you who have been following me for a while know that I left working as an employee roughly going on as of this month, 14 months ago. Okay. You're looking at 2 Decembers ago when I finally had enough and I walked out. Okay. So, how do you break free from a corrupt system? How do you get away from the distractions? And how do you benefit yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically, and really get down to the nitty gritty and benefiting your life? Now, I could tell you to go into Robert Kiyosaki's work. I can tell you to go into the rise of the Fourth Reich, or, how fascism works, how to overthrow the government, the Fair Tax, book that's out there. I can tell you can go out and get as many freaking books on cryptocurrency and investing as you want. But to better yourself, there is only 32 books that I would recommend. Now, keep in mind, I've got 28 of these books out of the 32 that I'm going to recommend to you. The others, I've got to save up and actually get them because they cost a lot of money. You're looking at the next book that I'm getting is roughly around $36, $37, and that's not including the shipping and handling fee from Amazon. However, if you have an app called Everend, you can actually get the PDF version or the the audiobook version of these books, or at least most of these books. One of these books is very, very intriguing to me because I am, how should I say this? When you're studying dark psychology, and I recommend William Cooper's book on dark psychology manipulation. That book there really benefited me in a lot, and it kind of opened my eyes up back when I was working for Dunkin' as an employee. You know, You don't have the shift lead numbers. You don't have the fucking digits to do your job, and yet you're expected to be a shift leader. It's like whatever, but not my issue. But anyways, when I read his book, it was like all those fucking games and lies just was made apparent. And it's like you got to be freaking shitting me. But anyways, when I started getting these books, and a few of these books I've had for quite a few years now. The first book and the fifth book, along with the seventh book, I've had for a while. A long while. Okay. But the rest of these I started getting into when I started getting into things like Stoicism, and I started getting into mythology. I started getting into psychology, parapsychology, dark psychology, and stuff like that. And trying to understand human nature in general and why people want to fuck each other over the way they do. And you don't see dogs and cats fucking each other over. You don't see the animal kingdom fucking each other over, but humanity does it, you know? So I asked myself for years, and trust me, for years, I started businesses and they collapsed. You know, I could not get a business started in general, and it pissed me off quite often because one, you'd either never get, you'd never get customers, or you'd never get the money to be able to keep the business going more than a month or two, or if you're lucky, maybe 4 to 6 months before you have to close the doors because you'd be going into debt. Well, a couple of years ago, I came across the channel by the name of Grim Hustle. And I liked the way this guy represented himself. I liked the way that he taught, not from a bureaucratic perspective of things that you see here in the US today, such as you either do this or this is going to be your consequence type thing. No. This was straightforward, right in your face. And I had to think about this, and I did my research into this, and I went out and I grabbed all these books. And like I said, depending if you can get them used or old, will save you some money. Okay. So I'm going to flip this screen around and I'm going to show you the books. Okay. And I'm going to do this from book 1 to book 28. All right. So let's do this here. Let me see here. I think it's this one. There we go. So this is the first book that I recommend. This book here will teach you about discipline, observation, and focus. This one here teaches you about your emotional state, the way you think. It's what you put out is basically what you get back, but this is more of a scientific perspective. And yes, if you're not, it does teach you from a Christianized perspective. So I will give you the heads up on that. Okay. So between these two books, you're going to learn quite a bit. And this one here is more of a pamphlet. But let me get over here. This next one is called Walden. And if you like spiritualism and you like being out in the woods, you like being out in nature, like, you guys know me. I put up, I don't know how many videos of me and my dogs, being out on the trails or at the dog park, down at the waterfront. This is a type of book that I would recommend to you because it feeds your imagination. Especially if you like camping or you like to go out and get a cabin and rent a cabin for like a weekend. Years ago, as you know, I was invited to an apostolic church, and at the time it was an apostolic church. Now it's a Pentecostal church with apostolic views. But anyways, there was a couple of guys that I used to hang out with when I first got started learning about ministry and stuff. And one of them had a connection that had a cabin up north. So we all went up there for the weekend. And I ended up going out onto the trails, and I didn't realize it. I was just taking my time. And what was interesting about that is you really get the sense for nature. You really get a sense for, the fresh air and the view of things. It's not like being in the city. It's not like being in a small hick town where you got about 500 to 5,000 people or whatever, you know. But this book here really enlightens you on the image and the spiritual gnosis of being in the woods, seeing things the way it's in its all natural, splendor. I really like that. So, the next one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, if you really want a perspective, this is a book to really get. And this one here really goes along with The Art of War. Now, this one here I actually got at a local bookshop. And as you can see, it's got The Art of War, The Prince, and On War. Not just the instructions to his generals by Frederick the Great, but you got the General Karl von Clausewitz, and you got Machiavelli. I love Machiavelli's work. So this teaches you strategy, whereas this one teaches you how to talk to people, how to, kind of persuade them, if you will. Think of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. Very, very good book. Now, for those of you who want to start a business or get in contact with a business and work your way up, Think and Grow Rich is a very, very good book. This book here basically teaches you if you can think it, you can create it. Basically, think manifestation. So, even in magic or witchcraft, you're going to be thinking about how do you perform a spell? How do you manifest money? How do you um, how do you manifest prosperity within your craft? Well, think about it this way. And like I said, Napoleon Hill is a great source of information. And if you're going to be dealing with corporations, sex, different types of people, you got to go with the Russian classic. The Russian classic, War and Peace. Love this book. I listen to it all the time on Everend. It used to be known as Scribd. And like I said, you can get most of these books right there on Scribd, or what used to be Scribd. It's now known as Everend. So, and this book is in audio. Most of these books are in audio form. Now, this one here is not on there, but if you want to understand money and the current money system, this will teach you what's valuable, what's seen as valuable, and how to beat the system at its own game. It's a little pamphlet, but it is something that really opened my eyes when dealing with things like checks and balances, dealing with the dollar, dealing with transfers, and all that stuff. You're actually understanding the perspectives of everything, dealing with currency, the different types of banks, the way they look and they see things. You want something that's contemplative. Leaves of the Grass, very, very old school. Walt Whitman, very, very old school. I mean, you're looking at a book that came out in like 1855. Okay? Very, very good book. You're dealing with old school language, old school prayers type things. And the way they did poetry in some cases, love that. But with this one here, like I said, with War and Peace and the way money and all this other stuff goes in, it really teaches you what's to be paid attention to. And you don't want to really share your goals or your aims. keeping silence, which is part of the Witch's Creed, is very, very good. Now, Bushido, The Soul of Japan by Naitobi. What is it there? I'm trying to look at his name here. It's a little dark. Inazo Naitobi. Okay. Now, this individual, okay, I've got several of his books. Okay, that way you can just see his name. Let me see if I can't get it. There you go. You want a book that teaches you about beauty, strength, discipline, routines. This is the one to do. His work, even though he started out as a samurai in training, at the turn of the century when everything went, from spiritual to Shintoism to industrial. Think about it like this. If you take a simple flower like the lotus or the cherry blossom, okay, in this case, the cherry blossom, look at how strong the root and the stem is of that one flower. But what it represents is about strength. It teaches you about balance, harmony, and it also teaches you about flexibility. Strongest flower, but this book is amazing. It was beautifully written. Outside of Miyamoto Musashi, this is the author that I would recommend. He did a lot of good books. Very, very good. Okay. Now, Night of the Soul. Some people would say that the Night of the Soul by John of the Cross is one of those books that teaches you about the darkness of human nature. Okay, think of betrayal, think of depression, if you will. Think of the darkness of the mind and how it can cloud you. That one there will do it. Seneca, on the other hand, on the shortness of life, and I have quoted this book several times since I got this book and read it. This book here teaches you that there's a lot of things that we tend to focus on, okay? We tend to focus on a lot of things that we shouldn't have. Think of obsession. You want obsession, think about your bills. Think about what you have to do on a daily basis. Nobody really takes the time to wonder, why do you focus on that? Because the world tells you you have to, right? Wrong. Think about it this way. If you cut most of that BS out of your life, your health would improve. The Road Less Traveled. Now, these next two books are very much more modern day, but they're worth it. The Road Less Traveled and I'm Okay, You're Okay. This book here is about traditional values. And sadly, in today's society, tradition and family values and all that stuff has gone out the window. You hear the term about love and fairness. That BS has been out the window for at least 30 years, and it's getting worse. This book here really fits to that, but it teaches you what matters. Thomas A. Harris, I'm Okay, You're Okay. This book here is one of those books that, how should I say this? It teaches you, let me get up here. It teaches you that every time you get knocked down, you have a decision to make. You have a choice to make. And this book really teaches you that just because you get knocked down doesn't mean you're defeated. It just means you have to rethink your strategy, rethink about your priorities, what matters, and what truly matters to you. And I really enjoyed that book. Shantorum. This book, holy crap! You want to learn. I don't know how many of you have actually spent time on the streets. I've spent time on the streets. I've lived on the streets in 2 different cities, and I've hung out with a lot of shady people. Okay, I'm not going to go into details out of respect. But when you learn to build a business and you want to build an empire from the ground up, and you don't have money, you don't have, the insight, this book will definitely do it for you. It's a good book. It's a little dry, but if you can work your way through, you will benefit from it. And then you have Crime and Punishment, a classic. Okay. Now think of all the guilt you've been led to believe, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Crime and Punishment is one of those books that it's been drilled into us that you need to feel guilt. You need to feel sorry. I mean, if you take something without asking, do you feel guilty about it? Or are you like, finders keepers, losers weepers? Possession is the 9/10 of the law, so to speak. But this individual did a crime, lived for a while, and then went to jail and confessed to his crime because he felt sorrowful. That is a Christianized perspective. Okay. Now, for you guys, okay, The Way of the Superior Man. I've talked about this book a few times. It was written by a man, okay? But the way it's written reminds you of the way a woman would be thinking, okay? I highly recommend that if you want to be a better husband, a better boyfriend, a better parent, and really benefit yourself as an honorable man. That book there will definitely teach you a lot about the nature of women. He really did an awesome job. Teutonic Mythology 1 and 2. With everything in occult literature today being corrupted and watered down, people are often asked me, why do I like the Mazagera Cabal? Why do I like certain types of occult practitioners? Why am I one of those old school kind of guys? Well, this is why. These books were put out by Carl Grimm and Jacob Ludwig, okay? Jacob Grimm, okay? These go back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, when these were originally put out and researched. When you look at what's being taken from you due to the constant renovations of things like Google, or how people are choosing and picking what books and what aspects fit the occult, and what can be shopped for and what can be dealt with, okay? These 2 books really put the old world, I'm talking Scandinavian and Slavic, Mesopotamia, principles, the old school belief structures in pagan deities and the mythology in a great, great sense. I really like that. Now, this one here, The Way of the Pilgrim, this is more of a little pamphlet, if you will. No more than maybe 98 pages. It's put out by Nina A. Tormanova. Probably butchered her name, and I do apologize if I did. When I first read this book, I had to put myself in that position. You know, picture yourself jumping on, like, say, the Mayflower, going from Europe to America for the first time. How would you feel about doing that? Would you be scared? Would you be worryful? Would you be kind of anxious? You know, but then you start taking in the fact that you've got a month-long voyage on a ship. You know, crossing an ocean by wind, if not longer, with the risk of you dying due to some kind of onboard disease, thirst, or hunger. You know, so, and then you finally get to your destination. You have to start from scratch. You have to meet the natives. You know, think of Howard Zinn's book on a people's history of the United States. Very, very good book. You know, even the other Civil War put out by Howard Zinn. All three of these books really tell you in a story that really gives you that imagination and puts you into the shoes of actually being there and meeting these people for the first time. You know, having the feelings and the emotions of packing your shit up and moving to another state, not knowing if you're going to be okay. You know, that book there is incredible. You want to better yourself. Now, this book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And when you look at, this is a book that I read. The first time I read this book, I was working at Dunkin' Donuts as the opening shift lead. And I had been that way for over a year. You know, and it was interesting because of the fact I started looking at the difference between upper management, junior management, and then you have your employees. And then on top of that, you got the customers, right? Well, let me put it to you this way. They say the oil makes the wheel go around. I want you to think about it this way. If you want to be a highly effective person, you got to have the discipline, the focus, and the self-motivation to put the work, the time and the work into what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're going into the occult and you're for the first time and you're wanting to learn about circles. You want to learn about triangles, for evocations or invocations. You want to learn the difference between a ritual and a ceremony. How do you summon a spirit? What kind of spirits do you want in supernatural entities do you want to bring forth? Am I going to put forth a business based off my spiritual or religious beliefs? You got to be able to put your energy and time into what you do. But this book here is really a parapsychology, in my opinion, perspective. And I'm just going to open up the page here so you can actually see it. Freedom to choose. It said that we have the ability to be free, right? Proactive model, right? The stimulus, the response, self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and independent will. Think of the witch's oath of to know, to dare, to will, to keep silent, and to go forth, right? Think about what you have to do to become one of the greats. Okay? If that means doing a video on YouTube daily, dropping, I'm going to pick on, just for a second here, I'm going to pick on Bokor Leonard Elmera, for an example, one of the best voodoo zonts that I know outside of my spiritual father. You look at how many videos he drops in a number of the day just on YouTube. You look at some of these billionaires that are out there to 170, hours a week. Okay? They get there an hour early. They leave 2 hours late. Now, what's the purpose of that? Number one, you're missing the rush hour. Number two, you're skipping your lunchtime because while other people are taking their breaks, going on lunch, you're doing the work. And then you're done by lunchtime. So you're looking at your upper management going, hey, what do you need done? I got time on my hands. So let's get some stuff done that you need done. That separates you from the ordinary person. This book taught me a lot. And I started doing that. And like I said, I started getting, before I knew it, I had the respect of my coworkers, my immediate managers, every single one that came in over the year. I was the go-to guy when they needed something. And since day one, I had district managers that came to me for shit. No one else, just me. A lot of my coworkers, fellow shift leaders and stuff like that, they couldn't figure out, how do I get so much done? Number one, it's about priority. Number two, it's about strategizing from what needs to be done up front, to what can be done later. And once you learn that, you'll be surprised at what you can do. Now, this one here, this is also a parapsychology book. It's a study of the popular mind, from individualism to herd conformity. Gustav Le Bon wrote this book, and it was spectacular. I'm not much, and you guys know me, I'm not much on crowds. I don't like big crowds, which is why you won't see me out during certain events like, say, parades or, say, for example, Black Friday, Christmas shopping, and stuff like that. I'd rather just order shit online and have it delivered. But when you think about your consciousness, your conscious mind, you're going to start thinking about, when do you lose your mind? When do you lose your individuality? When you are a solitary practitioner, you have opinions. You see the ethical meanings of right and wrong. But let's say, for an example, with what's going on in today's world, let's go with Minnesota, let's go with LA, California, Los Angeles, California. Let's go with New York City. Let's go with what's going on down in the capital, such as Washington, D.C. You have the reserves deployed. You have ICE moving through cities. Hell, even right here in Maine, there have been reports of ICE agents moving from Portland to Lewiston and Augusta, areas of the southern portion of the state of Maine. Okay, but unlike the other states, Maine doesn't have a riot going on. Okay, now think about what happens when you become a part of a riot. You lose your will to think, and you tend to get emotional. You tend to forget that you have a choice that you can make, and you end up following the herd because you want to be a part of something. You want to be something to work towards. You want to be, how should I say this? You really want to diverse, if you will, into something greater. All right? You lose yourself and become one with the many. Think, if you're a Star Trek fan, the best way to think about this is go from a Starfleet ship crew, where you're an individual performing tasks, to, say, becoming a member of the Borg collective. This is the difference that he talks about from a psychological and parapsychology perspective, on the difference between an individual mind state and a crowd mind state. Okay, and much, much more. I highly recommend that psychological book. Now, this book is Grim Begins. This is a book that I believe this was my 20th book that I got. And this book here really fascinated me because it took place during World War II, Cold War issue. And it talked a lot about, being a member of the military, being interrogated because your partner, slipped off and you were supposed to watch his ass, his six and stuff like that, and each other's six, meaning your backsides, to becoming a civilian, having a very high ranking father, if you will, that's influential, that you could probably call as a bastard, if you will. I'm not calling this man's father a bastard. I'm just saying it's more of the fact that if you have a hostile parent that's more military state of mind rather than somebody who's there for their kids, nourishing, you know, teaching them ethics, family traditions, rules and stuff like that, you're not going to see that, kind of thing in this book. But um, now think about Shantorum. So you go from an honorable life to a criminal underworld, going to prison and all that stuff, and then you're coming back and you're working your way up. Say, let's go with the triad or the Yakuza or the mafia, type setting. You're getting into the drug trade, you're getting into guns and all that stuff, and you get into the criminal world, and you rise up and you're learning a whole different perspective of honor, integrity. You're learning how to benefit yourself in a group collective, keeping your circle small, learning on who you can trust, who you can rely on, who's going to be there to benefit you and to build you up, if you will. Great book. It was very well written. It was actually their first book that they put out. And this guy's actually if I remember correctly, is a Norwegian actor, which I thought was kind of interesting. I saw him in a movie recently with, which is why I know this. It was a mafia movie with, I believe it was Jason Statham, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, it was an assassin or a former assassin that was seeking vengeance for his family getting murdered. And I think it was revenge or something like that. But like I said, don't take my word on it, on the fellow actor there. But this guy here played the mafia boss in that. And I caught the tone in the voice and it was like, wait, I know that guy. Sure enough, it's Grim Hustle from the YouTube channel. And that's him right there on the front page, the cover of this book. But yeah, that's his name right there. You can actually look him up on Google if you want. He's got a hell of a backstory, and his book is incredible. I highly recommend that. Now, this book, you want a freaking good book. I started listening to this one on Everend, okay, in audiobook form. Now, you hear the term dark souls, but you don't think about what dark souls really mean until you get into a book like this. And like I said, this book here, let me bring it up so you can see it. It's a good sized thick book. This is a hard-covered book. This one here, the Gulag Archipelago, you hear the stories of what people do. Like, let's take ISIS for an example. We're all aware of ISIS. We're all, aware of what happens in the Middle East when they cut off the heads with a machete type thing, or they'll shoot, assassinate you with a firing line, or hang you or something like that, or burn you or stone you to death, like they did with Saddam Hussein. Now think of some of the darkest prisons that you can go to, like in Russia, or say for an example, let's take American perspectives, offshore, for an example, like that one secret little base, that we all know, where they keep security risks and they torture them and all that stuff. Think of everything that you can possibly do to somebody, to their body, to their minds, to their emotions. This is the darkest book I have ever freaking read. And some of the shit that they did back in the 1960s during the Cold War, even going back even further, let's go back to the 1930s, the 1920s and 1930s. Holy fuck, dude. Some of those torture techniques, damn. That would make your mother blush. That's all I got to say on that one. Now, we all know parents are made to humiliate their children and stuff like that, and because that's just part of being a parent. But when it comes to physical torture, warfare and stuff like that, there is no book out there like this one. And you want to talk about the dark nature of the soul and what people truly are capable of doing to each other, I recommend this book. I highly recommend it. Damn good book. And I'm only right now, I believe I'm about halfway through on this book on Everend right now. I haven't even got to the physical copy yet. And believe me, I'm looking forward to actually getting into this book page by page and breaking things down. But this one here, 1984. It's a novel by George Orwell. Very, very good book. This guy's not even around anymore, I don't think. But you get into this book and you're going to be seeing it's more of a, how should I say this? This book is more of like, think of, trying to think of a good book here. Think of a book on poetry. Think of a book like, I don't know. Let's go with the News Cruise type thing. Deal with things that the government tells you on the news, and a lot of it is fake and stuff like that. But think of what's in your newspaper on the news and stuff like that. This is more like Paradise Lost, or let's go with a book more like trying to think here. Of course, I can't see it because it's all blocked by bags of books over here, which I've always told you guys I have all these books over here that's in bags. But this is a very, very good book, and I want to read something to you here so you can actually get a. This is on page 29. Thought crime does not entail death. Thought crime is death. Think of your constitutional rights. Best way I can put that to you, just on that one alone. Your First Amendment is being stripped from you. They're taking things from you and giving back to keep you occupied. That was something that was very, very interesting to me, to see how the Constitution is being dismantled and nobody even gives a fuck. They sit there and follow the protocol, the herd conformity, meaning the crowd, and they're doing shit like this, torture and everything, rioting, crime waves and all that stuff, and yet people are being blacklisted. They are being removed from the workforce by force, so they can't even get jobs in their own work field, so to speak. So this is something that I thought was very interesting, and when you get this book, you'll understand what I mean by that. 1984 is one of the best books. Now, The Sovereign Individual, Mastering the Transition to the Information Age. Ooh, This book, holy crap. When I got this book, I started delving into it. Within the first two chapters, it blew my freaking mind. And thinking back, and I've talked about this in past videos, seeing the difference of knowledge that is being taught in schools today. I'm talking, from say your parents' age to your age to your children, say to your wife's age or your girlfriend's age if she's younger or around your age, maybe even older if it could be switched, to your children, to your nephews and nieces' age, to your children's, age. It's just watered down so freaking much, and I wouldn't even classify it as teaching anymore. So, I mean, even like I said, going into Howard Zane's work, it's just backing up with what's in this book here, and I kind of want to read something to you here, which is why I kind of saved this book here. What might have been. History can be understood in terms of what might have been as well as what was. We know of no reason that microparasites could not have continued to play havoc with human society during the modern period. For example, it is possible that microbiological barriers to the exercise of power equivalent to malaria, but more virulent, could have halted the Western invasion of the periphery of in its tracks. Amazing, right? So you're talking about diseases. You're talking about what is a disease? The lack of information, the lack of understanding, right? This book goes into so much depth. It's not even funny. From the way people teach in schools to the way they don't teach in the workplace anymore. And they expect you to do your job. Falling income in transition, lowering the cost of knowledge, the banning of knowledge, the deprecating the monasteries. Wow. To the blackmail made easy, to why firms, information and transaction costs, everything that you're dealing with today in modern society. This book here was written, what was it? I want to say it was written back in, let me see here. I hate small print. 1997 was the first copyright of this. Amazing. Just seeing just how far knowledge has gone down from 1997. I graduated high school in 1998. So this came out a year before I graduated from high school, and I wish I had these books back then. So, The Brave New World, very, very good book. This book here is one of those books that deals, I'm going to see if I can't show it to you here. How should I say this? This is more of the future of utopian era, if you will. There's a lot of good work in this book. It's a very dry read, but worth it. I'm going to open this book up to something, and I want you to I want to read something here to you, but I got to get to the page first. So let me see here. All right. This is just chapter 2, for an example. Mr. Foster was left in the decanting room. The DHC and his students stopped into the nearest lift and were carried up to the 5th floor. Infant nurseries, neo-Pavlovian conditioning rooms, You remember what I said about this one here? Oh, just a sec here. Remember what I said about the darkest things that somebody can do to each other? And then going into the knowledge aspect, predicting your rights and everything. Look at this. This is what they're talking about, okay? About hitting that brave new world and what you're going to be going up against, how to get around it, and everything. This book here really knocks your socks off, too. I like these two books myself. I read this book a little bit, and I kind of want to read something to you real fast. I'm going to start on chapter 1 here because I think it really needs to be heard here, and then I'm going to go to a different chapter if I can get to the damn thing here. They're long chapters too, so I want you to see this here, okay? The hearth and the salamander. I thought that was a great analogy. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle of his fists, with this great python spitting its venom, kerosene upon the world, the blood pounded in his head. In his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all of the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the taters of and charcoal ruins of history. Man, freaking loved that aspect in just this. When you get further into this book, and I'm going to go into a different chapter here, so you can actually get a first. Oh, there it is. Chapter 3, Burning Bright. Lights flickered on and house doors opened all down the street to watch the carnival set up. Montag and Beauty starred, one with dry satisfaction, the other with disbelief at the house before them. This main ring in which torches would be juggled and fire eaten. Wow, okay. Let's go up down here. Betty snorted, "Oh no, you weren't fooled by that little idiot's routine. Now were now were you? Flowers, butterflies, leaves, sunsets. Oh hell. It's all in her file. I'll be damned. I've hit the bullseye. Look at the sick look on your face. A few grass blades and the quarters of the moon. What trash. What good did she ever do with all that?" Now, I want you to think about something, okay? I, I want you to think about something real fast here. When you look at the world today, okay? When you look at the world today, would you imagine that a president's on his way to being impeached for the first time? And they're claiming unprecedented, right? Now look at how troops have been deployed in the streets of our cities. How the government, which was fractured, cost of living has skyrocketed. The same BS spewed by politicians day in and day out with nothing changing. And then they ask you, who are you going to vote for? We're not allowed to ask this, but I'm going to ask. Well, if you're not allowed to ask, you're not allowed to question, then how are you going to learn? How are you going to grow? How are things going to change? Reading all these books, these 28 books, I've let go of fears. I've understood the system and how it works, especially from the mint, if you will, the reserve, the Treasury Department, to the local banks and the federal banks, to how to manifest my desires, how to imagine and strategize for everything that I do. Okay? And like I said, you can go into Robert Greene's work, you can go into other books on Bushido, you can go into, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You can go into Robert Kiyosaki, hell, even Donald Trump. I know a lot of people aren't thrilled with him right now. I think he's doing the best he can under the circumstances. He's just trying to change the system for the people, make things right. And the government's not liking it, which is why they're doing what they're doing. But instead of being distracted by drama online, get rid of that distraction. Get rid of your TV. Get rid of, turn your phone off. Get into a routine. Get into. One thing I learned about shinobi practices, for an example, which is the art of ninjutsu, is the type of routine. You do it day in and day out, and probably about a quarter, if not half, the amount of working out when you're sick, but you still do it, same time, just different locations. It becomes a routine. It becomes part of your daily routines, your daily devices, if you will. You become more focused, more disciplined. You end up doing more. Taking a book first thing in the morning, reading for 10 minutes, reading for 20 minutes. This morning, for an example, I picked up a book and I read a chapter within 10 minutes. Within 20 minutes, I had read 2 chapters. These chapters in this book, the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic, the chapters aren't very long in it, but it was enough that it was the way it was written. It made you think. You had to take down notes. And it's like, wait a minute. I'm seeing a pattern here within all the Grimoire traditions. I'm seeing a pattern within this book on metals, gems, people, structures, geometric shapes. And then you take these books here and you're looking at everything from the world perspective. You're seeing how our rights are being taken from us, how we're falling further and further into sheephood, not individualism, but herd conformity. People are more wrapped up with events going on in the city than they are bettering their life or their family structures. If things that they can do at work, like coming in an hour early, leaving an hour later, skipping lunch, Fahrenheit 451 really opened that up. Understanding knowledge, from the sovereign individual to the darkest things that could possibly go wrong at the workforce, like getting fired or the torment, being demoted or dealing with assholes or whatever, watching people come and go faster than you could say tits on a fucking nun, how to better yourself as a man, understanding the history and the mythology and the folklore in the purest sense, imagining the journey from point A to point B to point C, maintaining the structure of discipline, focus, integrity, and just applying it to your life, being dedicated, committed, self-motivated. You get into those routines and you just do it. These are the best books that I would recommend to you, is just these 28 books. And like I said, there are roughly about 32 books that you can get, probably a little bit more than that, probably about maybe 35 max. But I wish, I've got 1, 2, 3 bookcases full of books, double road and stacked, plus about 13 to 15 bags full of books, and notebooks and everything. And These are the best books that I've ever gotten, that were ever recommended. There's books out there that I've got a bag over here that's set up specifically for the Zeta male to read. Now, some of these books go back and forth between those bags, but it is what it is. Nothing to be ashamed of. But getting rid of the shyness and learning how to work with people to influence people into dealing with you rather than someone else. Strategizing. How are you going to set things in motion? What can I do to better the business and to get to where I want to be? Corporations don't like individualism. They like herd conformity. They like to shape you the way they want to shape you, not the way you want to be shaped. So understanding nature, understanding, that you discern what gets to you. Like I said in the past video, if somebody is pissed off at you because they're butthurt over something you said or did that they didn't like, then guess what? It says more about them because it's not your feelings that you have to contend with. They have to contend with their own. Okay? They have to contend with their own actions, their own idiocy. They're the ones that chose drama over bettering themselves. They're the ones that chose to be stagnant rather than self motivated. They're the ones that are hating you because it's like looking in a mirror to where you're growing. It's not that they separated from you. It's more of the fact that you have, how should I say this? It's more of the fact that you have evolved through knowledge and wisdom while they've remained stagnant. They can't compete with you, so it's easier to shun you, to hate you, and talk shit about you than to actually step up and do what they need to do to achieve apotheosis and achieve greatness in their own life. You know, one of the conversations that I've had with people in my own life is, how do you supply money to two houses? You got my house, and then you got my son's mother's house. How do you keep that money equal to where you always have money? And it's like, you got to understand how to invest. You've got to understand, money and the value of money. You know, it's not just the transactions such as deposits and transfers, which is what they get most of their benefits from. It's more the checks and bills and coins really don't fucking matter to the banks. So the fact that you understand that 90% of your money doesn't even remain in your account as long as they have it on hand when and if you need it. You understand how the system works. That's what makes you the threat. That's what makes you the threat. Because you have removed yourself from the natural cycle and become a natural. That's what they fear. That's what they despise. You become the individual. You become the, how should I say this, the adversary, if you will, at that point. So they're going to do everything they can to hate you, to force you out, and to shun you. So the best thing I can tell you to do is to get these books, read them thoroughly, do it slowly, take notes, reflect on it, and just learn. You can expand, like I said, go into Bushido, go into other money books like I Will Make You Rich. Let's go into fascism, or let's go with the rise of the Fourth Reich, how to hide your assets and disappear. You know, there's a lot of different things that you can go into that's going to benefit you when dealing with the world and preparing for the what if is going to come down. You don't have to sit there and worry, because if you're already, how should I say? The best way I can put this is the best way that Miyamoto Musashi put it. The reason he won so many duels is because number one, he already considered himself dead. He had come to terms with the fact that he is going to die. He may die, okay? Acceptance. Boom. Instead of looking at your opponent, you look at your own weapon. You let them move first, and you put their asses down. You see how that works? Why would you get your knickers in a twist when all you have to do is be observant? The world's playing checkers, you play chess. End of story. But people wanted to know how I started on my journey about 2 years ago. I started doing investing roughly about almost, what's it been now, 3 years? A little over 3 years. I'm on my 4th year of investing. Okay. I retired almost 14 months ago. And I'm still better off than these sheep working for money, because I've learned to get money to work for me. I started learning how to influence people to come into my corner. I started learning the difference between being, validated and just doing the work. If you do the work, you're not going to be wasting your time wondering, do people like what I do? Take YouTube for an example. Take TikTok. Take Facebook for an example. Okay? How many times have you come up and people are going, you need to, they're trying to get you to pay attention to the statistics, YouTube Studio, TikTok's, analytics, Facebook growth spurts of basically the same thing, the studio, if you will, of how to better your channel, go professional mode, and how to earn money by doing what you do. Why would I waste my time on that? The latest gizmos, the latest fashion, the latest product. I already have a toaster. Why would I go out and buy a new one because you added something to it? If there's nothing wrong with my toaster, why would I go spending money on your product? Okay? Now look at your magic. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Do you understand banishings? Do you understand cleansings? Do you understand the proper etiquettes of casting circles and of evocation and invocation? Do you understand utilizing offerings and sacrifices for spiritual conjuration, depending on what you're trying, or who you are trying to bring into the circle? Okay, who are you trying to manifest? What are you trying to manifest? Is it money, love, housing, a curse? Are you just trying to find knowledge and wisdom by working alongside demons? This is stuff that you have to sit there and reflect upon. But these books are the ones that are top of the food chain that I would recommend for you. All right? With that said, have a good day or a good night wherever you are in the world. I want to thank Nega Creed for jumping on here with me. Nolan Porter for jumping on here. Owen Pooh for jumping on here with me. Kelly Jocelyn, welcome back. And so forth. So, like I said, just keep learning. Back up what you preach with numerous sources and references, and always make yourself available to the public. All right? If you like what I do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Feel free to hit that notification button so you're not left behind or miss anything. And until next time, I'm out. All right? Have a good one.